And now, introducing the star of our show, Medea Benjamin. Let's hear it.
Well, wonderful to be here, and I'm going to have plenty of time to talk afterwards when the main event starts. But I thought I would just greet people now and maybe get a sense of who is here in the room. So I heard there are some people here from upstate New York. Anybody who's from upstate? Originally. And who has done any of the drone actions in upstate New York? Wonderful. Let's give them a hand. And who just got found not guilty for the drone actions? Fantastic. And who is here from Long Island? And anything you want to say about the peace work on Long Island?
It's proceeding.
It's proceeding, okay.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there is New York City. And don't you have some island here that they've like turned over to making drones with the Israelis?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So who knows about that? Who's working on that issue? About the state giving this massive subsidy to a company, Israeli company that's working on that's making
Roosevelt's Island?
Yeah, Roosevelt's
Yeah, it's a partnership of Cornell and Technion University of Israel, and exactly what they're going to do, drones probably, lots of other stuff of a very unclear sort.
Uh-huh.
It's part of Bloomberg wanting to have, you know, New York be a high-tech city.
Right, so we gotta keep going on that one and learn what they have up their sleeves, and it's probably not going to be good. What other peace issues are you working on in the New York City area?
Nuclear disarmament.
And is there anything new and interesting on the nuclear disarmament front?
Yes, there's a fabulous... Alice, tell us. There's a fabulous new campaign, I can abolish nuclear weapons, and it started with the international physicians, and they're going for a ban treaty, and they're not going to wait for the nuclear weapon states. They're getting the rest of the world to say they're illegal, because we've never done that, and that nobody should have them.
And Barbara, why don't you tell what you're working on?
Okay, we're working on counter-recruiting in the New York City high schools. We're acting, and I want to thank Staten Island Peace Action and all the others who volunteer to go to the high schools to give out information to parents to help them find non-military options for their life goals and to learn more about the misleading promises of recruiters. We're also working on militarization of youth in general, how the military and the corporations are so joined together that they reach out to kids from kindergarten through college, through movies, video games, objects, toys. I just saw a pair of sunglasses that said U.S. Army. The idea is to capture the idea of military for every kid that you know, your kids and my kids and everyone's kids. And we also, Alice and I are on a committee to shut down Indian Point. You tell.
The other night, Barbara's group, anti-recruitment, handing out leaflets about other ways of paying for college and going in the military. And every year now, for 6 years, parents are more and more receptive. I want one of those for my neighbor, for my friend, and so the momentum is with peace.
So am I repeating, are we learning what we're going to be talking about next, or can we keep just doing this? No, okay, great. So I would love to know what other people are working on and a chance to share here. Anybody else want to, Rusty?
Yeah, hi. So Peace is working on many causes, no war with Syria, no war with Iran, Israel-Palestine issues, linking the Pentagon budget with domestic cutbacks, and working hard at trying to bring those together. We're working on counter-recruitment going into high schools in Brooklyn and trying to bring information to students there. Anything else we do? And we're winning on every one of these things. We're winning on.
All right, let's hear it for Brooklyn for peace. Yeah. Awesome group. Anybody here working on NSA spying issues? Everybody? Anybody else want to talk about what you or your group is doing? Share with us a little bit here? Yeah.
Basically, what your group is.
With the Peace and Justice Task Force at All Souls Unitarian Church. And we have done a common read on the new Jim Crow. We're working on mass incarceration issues and issues of solitary people. And we have the economy with Richard Wolf.
Excellent. Anybody else want to share what you're doing here? Yeah.
I'm Margaret Melconi with Long Island Alliance for Peaceful Alternatives. Our project since last spring, has been working with students at Oxford the Peace Fellows program. It's a 2-semester program. The first semester is like a peace studies program, briefing sessions, training them in deliberative dialogue, discussion, advocacy, and media advocacy. So they do that for 10 weeks, and in the fall semester, several of them become, and a couple of them are with us today. Ariella's here somewhere, and Peter are interns to create a peace presence on the campus and work on the issues of drones and nuclear abolition.
Fabulous. Wonderful. Anybody else want to share what you're doing?
And tell about your radio station in Buffalo.
All right, Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim Anderson from Buffalo. Well, I can tell you this. We got a radio station which I host. We're bringing all the issues as much as we can about the anti-war movement. Also in Buffalo, as you know, we have what is known as the Niagara Falls Air Base, which a lot of our political leaders want to turn into a drone base. However, we have advanced from the Western New York Peace Center idea to turn it into a solar energy base. And we're pressing forward with it, and we think that's what it should be. Renewable, clean energy, no more war weapons, no more war anything, and we're doing our best in New York to leave our footprint.
Irene, what are you doing?
Okay. Coalition for Peace Action applauds PANIS and everything that we do together on nuclear disarmament. We continue our work on nuclear disarmament, on weapons and end to weapons trafficking at home and abroad, which in our current times is gun violence prevention, all too serious. So we have a very serious group of people in our organization working on that. The anti-drone initiatives that we are working on, mostly in our Pennsylvania area, where with the support of everybody else in New Jersey that we represent, because they're proposing to build a command control for the drones in Pennsylvania. So just yesterday, or Saturday, we had a big demonstration against that, and applaud Medea and everybody else who's working on this issue. So thank you, New York State.
Let's see, I know there's other people here doing great work that we would love to hear about.
John, tell about Roxy.
Wait, I forgot to mention, I would be remiss if I didn't mention to you that on November 10th, since we're working on the issues about and around diplomacy in Iran, that our annual Conference for Peace is taking place, and we welcome all of you to come. Our interfaith gathering, Free Will, Come for Free, preacher is Andy Young, and Ambassador Andy Young will also open the conference. So y'all come.
So who were you mentioning?
John.
John.
Hi, I'm John, and I teach at the College of Staten Island, which is part of CUNY, and we have a number of projects going on. We've been a group of people went out protesting the Petraeus teaching at CUNY. Taking the lead in that protest, and And also, CUNY is in the process, like many universities, bringing ROTC back to the campuses. So there's a big movement among ROTC to kind of reintroduce ROTC to big cities in the Northwest and in the West. And CUNY is being targeted. There's 3 campuses that have already agreed to take on CUNY and just started this year. City College, York College, and Medgar Evers. And at College of Staten Island, we're trying to take a stand and stop them. So we're working hard on that, and so that's basically what we've been working on.
That's Nick in the background. Nick, what are you working on?
I'm working right now working with the Granny Peace Brigade here. New York City, we are working toward a international ban on weaponized drones and drone surveillance. And so we're very grateful for all the support that we've had here in the city. We had a 6-day presence in the street during the General Assembly meeting. We had more than 60 people volunteer to participate in that. So we're really grateful for all that. Thank you.
For anybody who doesn't know, Nick is the one who makes these huge model drones. Like
Right now, 20 so far.
they're all over the country.
That's right.
Well, who is it? We have no right there.
Hi, my name is Mohammed Mahoubi. I'm originally from Pakistan, and it's been 5 years here, no, actually 7 years. And I appreciate Medea when she came back from Pakistan and visit about Pakistan at Cultural Project New York City. And she went all the way to Pakistan to account for her protest and with Tehreek Insaf, Pakistan Tehreek Insaf. So I really appreciate all your struggle for that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lori Arbeiter, and I'm with a group or project called We Will Not Be Silent. And we continue not to be silent. We are working on a collection of both shirts and signs, and the shirts now probably we've distributed over 70,000. Now there's the message began with We Will Not Be Silent in 6 languages, and that went all over the world, especially in Arabic and Farsi and Arabic and Hebrew. And now we're working on a collection of signs. Many of you may have seen that cover many issues, and we're almost there at 1,000 different messages. We're calling it 1,000 signs for our times. And those will be available so that we can show up at all your actions with the proper message to hopefully be captured and then shown in the media so we can disseminate these messages of peace and against war and against drones and in solidarity with whistleblowers and endless with climate change. We're trying to cover it all as much as we can, ending racism and so forth. So just We Will Not Be Silent is the group.
You want to model it there?
This is where it begins.
This is an example. Beautiful. Reclaim love if you turn it around. Turn around, turn around. Yeah. All the way around. Beautiful.
There's another
How many layers you got there?
I have one more underneath it that says "and racism." I always wear 3.
There's another. Medea, there's another.
Take it off.
Take it off.
See the third one.
Ariel Flanick. I work with the Long Island Alliance for Peaceful Alternatives, and others like the Afghan Peace Volunteers and Voices for Creative Nonviolence, but I just want to make an announcement. I know November 15th is your big action before the Drone Summit, but it's also the sentencing of Jeremy Hammond, the Occupy organizer and turned hacktivist who hacked into the Stratfor email, the private intelligence company. So that's November 15th, 10 a.m. here in New York City, and you can go to freehammond.org to find out more information. Thank
you. So I have a friend here from Geneva. Kareem, why don't you come up and talk about the work you do with your organization, Karam.
All right. Hi, thank you. So my name is Kareem. I'm from Geneva. I work with an NGO called Al-Karama. I met Medea because we work on the drone issue. We document strikes in Yemen. We just released the report documenting 10 strikes, and we're trying to take action on the UN and to try to make connection with American groups like you in order to understand how it works and to give you information and to collaborate on this field.
Give him a hand.
Messages of Peace from Western Massachusetts. I work with Massachusetts Peace Action, where we're trying to develop a program to move forward on the issue of Palestine. And historically for our organization, that's struggle. That involves a lot of struggle. There's a lot of division and conflict in the way Palestine is perceived, but we're moving forward. We're doing presentations in our high schools. We're doing presentations in our churches, really showing what ethnic cleansing is about, what occupation, life under occupation is about, and how we cannot be silent.
Very good.
I'm not sure if anybody mentioned this yet, but December 10th is Human Rights Day. And those issues that I talked about in our country, about mass incarceration and solitary confinement, you can go to the website of the National Religious Campaign Against Torture, NARCAT, and download 12 pages of information to share with rabbis and ministers so that they can bring that to their sermons and talk about the issues.
Hi, I'm Julie Verna I chair the International Committee of Peace Action at the United Nations, and we are a force there. With all the difficulties we have at the UN, with all the problems in the way people regard the UN, we are there. We have been the chair of the International Executive Committee, and we have meetings and coalition, and we have meetings to deal with all the issues that are close to our heart. As a result of that, this week, Epic Times decided to do something about me. Because I'm 92.
I'm not sure we believe that you're 92.
That's right.
Amazing, and can I give you a hug?
Check your eyes.
Amazing. We should all look so great at 62. Anybody else who wants to share what they're doing? I mean, this has really been fascinating to see everything that folks are involved in here. What a group. Anybody else that wants to share? Yes.
I belong to a group called Women Against War, in addition to Peace Action and all the great work we do there. But we recently had a vigil against drones in the Albany area, and we have T-shirts that say, Grannies Against Drones. We also work on Afghanistan, no more troops when we out of there. And also we have a random project as well. And all these other good things that Peace Action does.
So last chance now, because we're going to wrap this up. Anybody else want to?
Although we spoke from Brooklyn already, which is part of Long Island, by the way. Matthew Weinstein from Brooklyn for Peace. And Rusty mentioned in passing, but I'll go into a tiny bit more detail, that we are trying to reinvent what peace work is all about by hooking up and creating broader coalitions than just peace forces. We think this is a very important aspect of our work. You know, Brooklyn for Peace has several hundred members, so we work by committee. I'm on the Peace and Economic Justice Committee. And in Brooklyn, the governor is trying to close down 11 hospitals in the richest country in the world because they need all that money for the $500 billion military budget every year and the 2 unpaid wars and so on and so forth, but not any money for hospitals. So we have made alliances with some of the unions at Litch, nurses, NYS, New York State Nurses Association, at Downstate, which is governed by SUNY, which Cuomo has his eyes on in order to close down. It's a teaching hospital. There you have United University professionals who call Brooklyn for Peace regularly and ask us to speak at their rallies, where we make the connection, which is not easy to do because everybody's in their own little silo, about military versus human needs. They're fighting for their jobs and their livelihoods. We're looking at it in terms of money being stolen from the needs of the community. That's a hospital that serves a large swath of Brooklyn, mostly poor and communities of color. Likewise, libraries are being threatened with closure by Mayor Bloomberg, and we have made alliances with Citizens Defending Libraries, and both of those organizations attended our fundraiser last week, and were introduced to the crowd there. So this is a new way to do peace work, and it's very important in my estimate. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Well, I think that's a great note to close out this part on, which is making all those connections about where our money goes and the issue about our budget being a moral document that tells a lot about what our priorities are. So we can wrap this up and people can eat and drink?
Yes.
Yes? Want to tell them what
Yes.
the plan is?
The plan is from 7 to 7:30, we'd like you to have some food, have some wine, some sparkling water, and take a look at the interesting silent auction items. We had a secret rendezvous in Washington, D.C. about 2 weeks ago where we exchanged Code Pink memorabilia from Ty's car to mine and brought it back to New York. These are historical protest signs, wonderful smocks, and all kinds of interesting things. Please take a look at them. And then many people have donated some very interesting items, including a weekend in the Berkshires, near where Pat is, and some very wonderful things. My daughter donated a 2-hour assessment as a professional organizer. Hope you take a look at that. And so go for it. Take a look.
So I just want to thank everybody in this room for the amazing work that you do. That was really a wonderful sharing. Thank you.
Being here and bidding on the silent auction items and taking the time to support Peace Action, so thank you. And there's a million people I want to thank. Last night I was falling asleep and I was freaking out, wondering if I was going to forget a person or two to thank, so if I forget you, I'm sorry. But, you know, all my family and friends that are here, and the people at Scholastic, the fundraising committee that did such an amazing job putting this together. Our volunteers, everybody that came from near and far, people are here from all over the place. Especially want to thank Medea for being here and agreeing to do this. I had the real honor and pleasure of working with Medea and Nick Modern, who's here somewhere, with the No Drones Network, and it's been great, and we're still, you know, keep going. We have our vigils we do in New York City a couple times a month. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the introducer, who is Dana Beliki.
Got that right?
Nice. I met Dana when I first started this job a couple of years ago. We shared an office with Code Pink in the city, and we were just, I took the job, and then the director of IVAW took me out to lunch, and he said, "You know we're losing our office space, right?" And I said, "No, nobody told me." So anyway, that's what happened, and Code Pink eventually wasn't with us anymore, but Dana and I met then, and Dana is going to introduce Medea to you all, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to her, Dana Believe.
Hi. Oh, I'm not sure what to do here. Hold on. Okay. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Hi.
Seats up here.
Oh, oh yeah, come. Seats.
We got
There's a seat here, seat here.
We've got 4 seats here.
Yeah, we got seats up
There's
here.
one right here.
Irene, come on.
Couple over here. Come on, don't be shy. Don't be shy.
4 more here. 4 more here.
Yeah. Mike, let's use it.
Rusty here.
Oh, and Medea's sitting right here. Look, there. You get Medea's seat. All nice and warm.
Okay, we got 2 more seats here.
Couple more. All right.
Okay.
Be shy. All right. Well, you can come on in, and I'll just start talking, and you can gravitate towards the sound of my voice. So.
Someone sitting here. Come around. Come around. We've got another seat here. Let's make sure. Let's not have any empty seats. Come on, Cheryl. No.
All right, I think we're good, and people know that if they want to come and hear some work.
All right.
So hi everyone, my name is Dana Bolicki. I'm really honored to be here tonight and to see all the lovely pink sparkly crowns. So I'm an activist. I'm a life coach, and I'm a communication strategist. And once upon a time, I was the boss of Medea Benjamin. So we're going to track back a moment. Come with me along my story here. The first time I ever saw Medea Benjamin was 2000. I was in college, and some friends of mine, we decided to go to the Green Party's Super Rally in San Francisco, or Oakland. And what I don't really remember, as nice as a man he is, I'm sure I don't really remember Ralph Nader at all. And what I do remember, besides Patty Smith, is seeing this really, I was way in the back, seeing this really tiny woman walk up on stage, and I forgive her now for her bowl cut that you had there. Your hair's a bit cuter now. And what I remember, though, not so much what she said, but I remember the energy, right? How the energy in the room shifted, right? And the ferocity of her voice, and that she almost didn't even need the microphone in this huge hall. And I remember thinking, like, I want to vote for that woman. In fact, I would like that woman to be president. So fast forward a few years, and I get this job with Code Pink. I'm out of college, and the job is to help them project manage the book Stop the Next War Now, which we published in 2004, or beginning of 2005. And the first conversation I had with Medea on the phone, she said, "This is a big project. It's a short amount of time, and just tell me what to do. You get to be the boss of me." And I was terrified and exhilarated. And so I did that. I'm not necessarily the boss of her for the next, following 6.5 years, maybe a little bit here and there. But there's so much that I learned from my time with Code Pink. And so I could probably write an entire book. But given that this is just a friendly intro, I'm going to give you my top 5. And I made some notes on my phone here, so bear with me. And these are kind of in no particular order. First one is, if you can't carry a tune, mouth the words. And this rule actually still applies when you're in jail. And there's nothing to do but sing all night long. Number 2 is know your numbers and your facts. But don't forget the emotion, right? Don't forget the power of a personal story. Numbers and facts will only get you so far.
True.
Number 3 was never let go of your banner. Ever. Don't ever let go of it. I don't have the answer of how not to let go of it. We worked on some innovations, really top-line thinking for many years, but never quite got it right. Number 4 is the best time for a salsa dance party is midnight, and only after you've been marching, protesting all day long, running around town with crazy outfits on, and regurgitating very heartful talking points to dozens of reporters and making many banners and other big, huge props to carry around, because that is the best time according to Medea Benjamin. And the 5th comes from right when I started, and we were doing the book project together. And it was Medea and I and Jody Evans, the other Code Pink co-founder. We were sitting at the Code Pink around the table, Jody's kitchen table at the Code Pink headquarters in Los Angeles. And we're looking at this huge project, this huge book project, all of our different deadlines, right? Like really digging in. This was the day we were gonna dig in together. And we get a call or an email, a smoke signal, whatever it was, from Dar Jamal, investigative reporter, and he was in Fallujah. And he said, what is happening here is unimaginable. And no one is talking about it, and we have to do something. There are thousands and thousands of people who are just flooding into the desert. Winter is coming. These people are left with nothing. And so my job was to make all of the stuff at the table make sense, and what I was shown was the priority. And the priority equaled us putting that book and all of those deadlines aside to do what we could to gather medical supplies and money and support and help tell the world what was happening right then. And so that was the day that I learned my priorities. And once you learn something like that, you cannot unlearn it. And I am just so deeply, deeply grateful for that, and so honored to be here with you tonight. So without further ado, my dear friend and teacher, the lovely Medea.
So I think that last lesson was never stick to your deadlines. I'm not sure that's a good lesson. Remember the photo op, right? The one photo. So before we forget the photo op, could I ask everybody who's got a crown on to come to the front of the room? You know, a boa can count too. When we started Code Pink, people would say, these people can't be serious. Anybody who puts a silly crown on their head can't be serious. So let's hear it for the serious people who put crowns on their heads. Of course, when you do the photo op, you have to have the photographer. We got that ready. Oh, yeah, so, and we got a crowd in. Some people have to come towards the front. How do we look? We need a director. Somebody's got to direct us. So this is part of the work, right? Organizing, which is organizing for the photo op. And I'll just keep talking as we're doing this.
We gotta get it out.
There we go. I think we're good.
Everybody give a
Yeah, all y'all.
All right, so I'm going to keep talking. You all figure it out right here. So,
I can see that.
no, but you got to do it quietly. So here we go. I want to make a couple of points while we're organizing this photo op here. But you got to be quiet. Just do. So I was flying on US Airways this week. And as we're getting on to the flight, they say, is there anybody here military if there's anybody here in military, you get to go on first, and everybody give them a big hand for their service. So I got up and said, are there any teachers here? And could you stand up and let's give them a hand for their service? And I say this because I was asked to talk tonight about what are some of the influences that took me on this route. And I have a teacher right here in the room who is really very responsible for my life trajectory, and that is James Paul right there. So Jim, if you could stand up and we could recognize how important teachers are and the books that we read and how they influence our lives. And anytime you're on the airplane and somebody wants to give a hand to the military, say, "End the teachers." So, okay. So we got our. She's serious about this. So I'm just gonna. I'm gonna keep talking here. So, a teacher. How many? Oh. Thank you all. So how many people here would say that one of the major influences in their lives was the war in Vietnam? Raise your hands.
I'm embarrassed to say so.
So, yes, I mean, unfortunately we are more of an older crowd here, but I think we do have to recognize that part of the reason that so many of us in the peace movement are an older crowd is because we had that experience of Vietnam. I'm going to take this off now. And I have an assistant, Dana, who took your place, and she was going to go off this week and speak at the University of Wisconsin. And she asked me for some talking points when she was speaking. And I said, well, you know, you can mention how we didn't really have to create a peace movement during the days of Vietnam because there was a draft. And she said, what's a draft? And I was blown away. So we had to talk about the draft, but you know, it's been a long time, and we have to recognize that the powers that be, whoever makes these kind of decisions about how to keep wars going on, you know, understood very well that when you had a draft, you had a peace movement. When you had a draft, you had young people who were the heart and soul of the peace movement. When you had a draft, you had people who didn't have to be taught about why war was wrong because they saw for themselves and they told their family members. And my own involvement around this came because my sister's boyfriend was drafted to Vietnam. And I was in high school, and he was one of these really sweet guys. He was on the football team, a very all-American kind of guy. And he would write letters month after month, and the letters got weirder and weirder. And after about 6 months of being there, he sent the ear of a Viet Cong to my sister to wear around her neck as a souvenir. And I just thought, how could this be? In 6 months, you take a very nice, wonderful guy and you turn him into a monster. And it sent me on the path of saying I had to do whatever I could to stop war. And I realized as I started organizing that I wanted to work in the world to create something positive. And how many of you here knew William Sloane Coffin? Raise your hand. So as a young woman, I got a chance to hear him preach once in Riverside Church, and it was just an unbelievable experience. And to know that here was a man who was, right, he was a CIA agent at one time. He was a member of Skull and Bones. And he became a visionary leader of the peace movement. So there is the power of redemption for you. And to hear this man talk, and I realized that I wanted to go out and be part of a world movement for peace, and I realized listening to people like him, peace and justice went together. And I thought, all right, how can I contribute? And decided that I needed a skill. And so I went to school at Columbia University here, got a master's degree in public health nutrition, and thought I would go out in the world and help people. And part of helping people, I thought, was going to some of the poorest places and helping people to feed themselves and feed their children. And little did I know, as a very idealistic young person, that people know very well how to feed their children. And they really don't need this young, privileged white gringa coming to their communities to tell them. And when I went to a place like Guatemala and was told, teach these people what malnutrition is and how to feed their children, they'd say, we are working as maids in the homes of the rich people. We know what the rich people feed their children. We would like to feed our children that food, but you know what? We can't, because our land was stolen from us by the big fruit companies. And that was United Fruit, that was Dole, those were the big fruit companies. And so I realized that violence comes in many forms. It's not just violence at the point of a gun. There's violence of taking people from their land, of stealing their land from them. Right. And then I learned it again when I went to work in Africa. And I worked in refugee camps for people who were trying to liberate themselves from the yoke of colonialism. And in those refugee camps, I found people coming in with babies who were dying. And when you have babies dying in your arm, you want to, try to stop it in that individual, but you want to find out, why are these babies dying? And as I went out into the communities, I realized that one of the things that was happening, and some of the older folks in the room are going to remember this, is companies like Nestle dressing up as doctors and nurses and going into these poor villages to tell these women, don't breastfeed your children, give them this powdered milk, and this will make them healthy like the white babies you see, the rich white babies in the homes of the rich people. And I just couldn't believe that anybody would sink that low to send people out into villages to get money, little bits of money from the poorest people in the world, knowing that what would happen is they'd mix the the powdered milk with water that was dirty. They wouldn't have money to buy the next can of milk, and that their breast milk would die up and their babies would die. And to see that kind of violence because corporations wanted to make a little bit more money was so shocking to me as a young woman. And those were the days before computers, when I could just get online and say, who's doing work to stop Nestle's and these practices. We had to find each other through very difficult ways. And I did manage to find out that right here in New York City, there was a campaign against Nestle's and the other companies that were doing these same practices. And we worked together in the first global campaign ever to get a code of conduct to stop corporate abuses in that particular industry. And it was an amazing lesson to me to recognize that we could do that we could come together, that we could shame these big companies, and as a global community say, we will not tolerate that anymore. And so I've seen over the years both the huge problems that you encounter, whether it's through government abuses, corporate abuses, and the power of resistance. And the power of resistance is something that I think everybody in this room is involved in. And at the earlier session, we had a chance to go around and have people talk about what they were doing. And it was amazing to see just in this room how many people are working on really fantastic campaigns that are changing all kinds of issues that are so related to peace and justice. And I try to work a lot with young people because we need to. I mean, it is the youth that are going to change this world. And when we had a big campaign going to try to stop the war in Iraq, raise your hand if you were part of that campaign. Raise your hand if you weren't part of that campaign. Because you were too young, maybe? Yeah, all right. And that was a time when we saw global resistance, amazing level of global resistance, so much so that it is now in the Guinness Book of Records that February 15th, 2003 were the biggest demonstrations ever in the history of the world. When there were about 600 cities, somewhere between 6 and 10 million people who came together, quite extraordinary to be able to get that kind of global buy-in to a war that hadn't happened yet. And again, you see the power of community. Just like we saw the power of trying to stop the World Trade Organization in Seattle, that was something that I was very involved in at the time, and saw the way that we could come together across sectors of people who were working on environmental issues, people who were working on labor rights issues, people who were working on peace issues, coming together to say, global corporate government, I don't think so. That's not the way that we want to live, with this secret corporate-led structure that's going to make decisions that are going to affect the lives of everybody on the planet. And seeing that we were able to literally link arms and surround the convention center in Seattle to shut down the World Trade Organization is something that I will never forget. And to this day, the World Trade Organization has never had the kind of power that it had before that meeting. Gives me a chance to see what I wanted to talk about from here. So, working with young people. So I remember after that big demonstration that we had around Iraq, I had been traveling to some universities and meeting with young people. And one of them said to me, you know, I've been doing this work for a long time. And I said, how long? They said, 2 years. I've been doing this for 2 years, and I don't see any results yet. And I said, yeah, sometimes you got to be patient with this work. And sometimes you see the results quickly, and sometimes you have to wait a long time. Well, fast forward now 12 years. And I think we're starting to see some of the results of the seeds we planted. On the negative side, it's 12 years of destruction, of 12 years of taking the country of Iraq that had already suffered 13 years of sanctions, and then occupation, and to this day is one of the most violent places now in the world, thanks to the US invasion. 12 years, and we look back on not only the deaths of so many of our soldiers, but the wounded, both physically and mentally, that will go on for generation to come. 12 years forward, and we look at the disaster of Afghanistan and how the Afghan government that wants to stay in power is saying, you can't leave because we will fall apart, because the billions of dollars we put in has not been enough to create a stable government, because the government is not responding to the real needs of the Afghan people. Fast forward, you have Maliki coming from Iraq this week to say, we need help because we can't keep our own government together. So we have, on the negative side, the trillions of dollars that the US has spent without having positive results on the ground. But on the positive side, you have 12 years of movement building, of educating people, of letting people know that democracy does not come to other people in the barrel of a US gun. That democracy is something that people build themselves from the ground up. And if you really want to help support democratic movements overseas, keep the US military out of your country. So when you fast forward, you see the fruits of the work of people in this room. When Barack Obama wanted to take us into another war in the Middle East, a war in Syria, you think, what the hell got into him that he would even contemplate taking us into another war? And yet, that macho testosterone does it every time. I put my red line here, and damn it, you know, they crossed my red line. Luckily, the American people did not go along with it this time. And it was pretty amazing to be in Washington, D.C. and watch it from the vantage point of the center of the empire. Because while we set up an encampment outside of Congress, and normally you set up an encampment outside of Congress And the Capitol Police are there right away to say, you're not gonna set up an encampment right outside of Congress. Guess what? They let us do it. And the only complaint they had is when we had music on, they didn't like the music. They wanted some other kinds of music. They had requests that they were making. So we were 24/7. And you know, sometimes when you finally get them to let you do something, you say, but you can't sleep there. They let us even sleep there. It was amazing. So we set up a big whiteboard outside, and we put the undecided Congress people on there. And anybody that walked by, we'd have a packet for them. And we'd say, go to Rayburn number 1247 and speak to so-and-so. And if they would say, well, I'm not a constituent, we said, we are all constituents now. Just go to their damn office and talk some sense into them. And we were sending people into their offices. We visited every single office of anybody who was undecided. And when we went into their office, it was an amazing thing that you would hear, because this was not a left-right kind of thing. This was a left and right kind of thing. This was something that was off the charts in terms of political divides. It just didn't exist. So you'd go into an office and you'd see this beleaguered person answering the phone, you know, and the phone would be ringing off the hook, and they'd say, yes, we understand that you don't want to go into a war in Syria, and yes, we understand you want to defund Obamacare. Thank you for calling. And then you'd go to the next office and you'd hear the phone ring and they'd say, yes, we understand no war in Syria, and yes, we understand that you want a Medicare for all kind of single payer system. So you had all these different people coming in, and you know, it was a time where we were not like in the days of the Iraq War, that we could bring out the numbers in terms of protests, marching in the street. This was a spontaneous insurrection. And it was people that were really using the old-fashioned pick up the phone and call your congressperson, the old-fashioned go to their town hall meeting when they're in their districts and talk some sense into them. And it was one of the few times in my life I have ever seen Congress people saying that they were getting like a 99% no rate when people were calling, and Congress people actually listening to their constituents, which is so rare these days. So, you know, there was a lot of talk about the people are war weary. Well, I think to some extent we're certainly war weary, but there's a better way to put that, and saying the people are now war wise. And we are certainly war wise right now. And it's very exciting to see a transition happening, despite the Democrats and the Republicans. It is happening from the grassroots, from the people. So we stopped a U.S. engagement in the war in Syria. Now we got to do something to stop the war in Syria. And amazingly enough, there are actually serious talks going on with Iran right now. You know, what is one of the biggest lobbies in this country aside from the NRA and the AARP? AIPAC. If anybody doesn't know AIPAC, it is the lobby that supports the most right-wing part of the Israeli government. And it is the lobby that has wanted to drag the U.S. into a war in Syria. Didn't win on that one. And AIPAC was really used to getting its way. And AIPAC would like to see a military intervention in Iran. What is happening right now is there is really no appetite for a war in Iran. What we have to do is roll back the crippling sanctions that are hurting the ordinary Iranian people. But we have to be thankful that because of the war wiseness of the American people, there are serious negotiations going on despite what AIPAC would like to see happening. That is real progress. And that brings me to another issue, and that's the issue of the drones. Now, the drones is something that very few of us were working on a couple of years ago. And when we would go out to places like the Air Force bases. I remember being out in the Creech Air Force Base where there were literally 5 of us holding a sign that said, "When drones fly, children die," and a little voice in my head anyway saying, "Am I crazy being out here in the middle of nowhere with 4 other people and people ignoring us as they're going into their base?" I'm sure many of you have felt that in sometimes when we are very small numbers. But we went out there month after month after month. We hooked up with the wonderful people in upstate New York, and raise your hands, the upstate New York people who are here. You all have been a tremendous inspiration. The Gandhian wave of people going in and getting arrested and arrested. And the last trial, Linda, can you say what happened in the last trial?
Nothing short of a miracle. We were found not guilty on one technicality, that we were not on private or on public property, which you need for a disorderly conduct charge. Thank God, and God bless him, the colonel got up, the head of the base got up and said, "Oh, we own to the middle of the road." Took care of that. And then the judge said to the DA, when the DA contested the verdict, the judge said, "I didn't find mens rea," which is Latin for guilty mind, which meant he heard our hearts, and he listened.
He heard your hearts and he listened. I mean, that is so incredible, so absolutely beautiful. And so for those of us who've been working on this issue, and where is Nick Motern, who's just been absolutely incredible, being out on the streets, building these amazing model drones that we take out. And the grannies, how about the grannies who've been doing so much work? The grannies, stand up. Grannies, get up, the grannies who are here. Stand up, grannies, come on. Catholic Workers, World Can't Wait, fantastic groups that have been doing such wonderful work on this issue. And we fast forward and we see that while 2 years ago we had 83% of the American people saying it was just fine to kill terrorist suspects with a drone. Disgusting to think that people thought that was fine. To today, where I really believe if a poll was taken, and I was thinking we really should collect our money and get a poll taken now, because I think we would find the majority of people against drones at this point. I really think the opinion has changed that much. And this week has been an unbelievable week. I mean, we have had reports by Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, 2 reports from the United Nations, 2 of them, one by the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and another by the Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial Killings. We have had the first open discussion at the UN where country by country people, representatives would state how opposed they were to the US policy on the use of drones. And we had a chance to, for the first time ever, bring drone victims here to the United States. And this is done by Robert Greenwald, who just did a new film called Unmanned. It will be released tomorrow in Washington, D.C. And tomorrow, for the first time, Congressman Alan Grayson will hold a briefing where Congress, if they show up, will get to hear directly from young people whose grandmother, 68-year-old grandmother picking okra in the field, was blown up by a drone. First time ever to hear from drone victims. It is really quite remarkable how things have changed. And when I had a chance to hear Barack Obama give his foreign policy address at the National Defense University in May, I really was listening very carefully because I wanted to hear some good changes. I wanted to hear that they had reflected on what the world was saying about drones and were ready to make some significant policy changes. And when I didn't hear it, I felt compelled to stand up and to say something. And being compelled to stand up and say something is really to do it on behalf of the people who don't have the opportunity. People in Pakistan, and we have a friend from Pakistan here. Can we thank him for being here? People from Yemen who don't have a chance to address the president. People in Afghanistan who don't have a chance to address the president. So many people who have been harmed by our policies. So it was an amazing opportunity to do that. But I think that we are really making history in the last 2 years. We are forcing our government to change its policies. We are forcing our government to admit it is using drones, which it wouldn't even admit. Did you hear the former spokesperson, Robert Gibbs, who said when he got the job as a White House spokesperson, one of the first things he was told is if anybody asked you about drones, you know nothing about it. You don't say anything about it. You don't even acknowledge that the U.S. is using drones. Well, we have certainly taken off the veil of secrecy around drones. We have certainly forced the government to be a lot more open about it, but we've also forced the government to make changes in the policy. The number of drone strikes has gone down dramatically from the last year to this year, and they say, oh, well, we've killed enough people. And we say, oh yeah, every time you kill number 4, number 5 becomes number 4, number 3 becomes number 2. And now there are 40 groups that say they are affiliated with Al-Qaeda. This has been such a successful strategy that you have used that now you say there's not only Al-Qaeda in Pakistan, but in Yemen and in Somalia and Mali and on with 40 different groups. Obviously, this is a strategy that only leads to perpetual war, and the American people are sick and tired of perpetual war. So I wanted to end on the note, I think, that would reflect what the judge said, that he heard our hearts. Because I think the most effective organizing we can do is organizing that comes from the heart and comes from our love of humanity. I mean, certainly we are angry at the policies of our government, certainly are angry at our Congress for not reining in the executive branch. Certainly we are angry with our courts at not playing the role that it should play. But it really is that we're coming from a place of love. And when I have a chance to travel around the world and meet such fabulous people in all of these countries where the U.S. is just killing people, it reinforces that love for humanity. So I wanted to end with a couple of quotes here. You can tell me who this one is from. At the risk of seeming ridiculous, let me say that the true revolutionary is guided by great feelings of love. Who said that? He said Einstein. Einstein should have said it, but it was Che Guevara. How about this the one? This is somebody who is known for the phrase of talking about a lover's quarrel. No, a lover's quarrel with the world. He said, we too must carry on a lover's quarrel with the world, so that when we depart this life, we leave behind a little more truth, a little more justice, a little more peace, a little more beauty than would have been there had we not cared enough about the human race to quarrel with it, not for what it is, but for what it yet might be. William Sloane Coffin, excellent. And this last one is my favorite because it's by a woman. And because we got a chance when we went to Pakistan and went up into as close as we could get to the tribal areas where the U.S. has been using these drones. We had a chance to have a meeting with Pakistani women and talk to them about our hopes and our visions for the future. And what we did is we talked about Julia Ward Howe and the original Mother's Day proclamation, which is so beautiful. So I want to quote some of it here, and what we did in Pakistan is we got up and we held hands. So I hope that isn't too corny for you, but let's do it. Let's stand up and hold hands. And I'll say the first part and then ask you to repeat the last part after me. So one part she says is, our husbands will not come to us reeking with carnage for caresses and applause. Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. We, the women of one country, let's repeat that.
We, the women of one country,
will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs. From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, disarm, disarm, disarm. Thank you.
Also about drone warfare, and she has some copies with her here tonight. If you're interested, you should talk to her about it. It's an amazing book. And Medea's been, like she said, to Pakistan, to Yemen. She's really seen all this firsthand. And I also wanted to mention quickly the campaign, correct me if I got this wrong, a campaign against killer robots, which is something that's started out and has a very weird sci-fi type of name, but it's very real. And these reports that are coming out from the UN now against autonomous killing machines that are going to be taking the human element out of the decision to kill, it's happening right now, and we really have to be vigilant and make sure that this does not move forward. We have to take the money out of this type of work right now. The drone summit, right. And Code Pink is hosting a drone summit in Washington, D.C. on November 16th and 17th. It's going to be an amazing weekend, and you can buy your tickets online. You can go to codepink.org and find, it's a sliding scale. It's really just about being there and taking part in the advocacy and learning, and I'm sure it's going to be amazing. I'll be there, and hopefully I'll see you there. So before we wrap up, we have the actual William Sloan Coffin Award to present. But I want to make one quick mention, since Medea talked about the future and student organizing. I want to embarrass Lindsay Monin, who's in the back there, who's Peace Action's New York State's student organizing coordinator. And without her, this would not have happened tonight. She stepped out of her role of helping me do everything to help me do this too, and thank you, Lindsay. And we have some of our students here as well. If you're still here, jump up and down or wave your arms or something. And we have some of our students here, the Long Island Alliance's intern. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you coming and being a part of what's next for everybody. So, okay, Medea. So first, Councilwoman Debbie Rose, who is a progressive from Staten Island. She couldn't be here tonight, but she gave you a citation, and she wanted us to present it. Thank you to Sally and David Jones for making that happen. Debbie's amazing. And our own Carol Houston. Over there. She saw this t-shirt and thought of you, an angry peace bird, and wanted us to present it to you as well. There you go. Nice. Okay. Now this is going to be hard. To open the box with this in my hands. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to read it out. It says, William Sloan Coffin Jr. Peacemaker Award, Medea Benjamin, Peace Action New York State, thanks you for your passionate pursuit of a more just and peaceful world. Thank you, Medea.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Oh, hold up your wood. The photo op.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheryl, you have something.
I was just going to recognize Sally and Jim.
Sally and Jim? Oh, yeah. Sally and Jim. So we also want to thank Jim Anderson, our Peace Action New York State president, all the way from Buffalo. I don't think the man sleeps when he comes to New York City. He's like, no, I came in on the train overnight and I'm taking the bus back and I have a meeting in the morning and I'm, he never sleeps. Sometimes he shows up at the office and I'm like, what are you doing? And also Sally Jones in the pink boa back there. Sally's responsible for this beautiful space and for pretty much everything. Thank you, Sally. Sally is really everything. Thank you. I have the space for another, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. The silent auction is going to end in about 15 minutes, so if you want to, bid on something, please do. I really want to thank everybody for coming from the bottom of my heart. We really appreciate your support for our student organizing, for our anti-nuclear, anti-drone, pro-peace and justice agenda. And Medea, thank you for all that you do, and thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And have a great night.